What's going on, everybody? Welcome into a St. Patrick's Day edition of the Sunbelt Syndicate. I'm not honestly sure if I've ever done a St. Patrick's Day live episode before. Have you guys done one before?
Not that I can recall. Certainly not one this sober. I'll be honest about that.
Well, come on, you had the green beer out earlier, man.
I'm working on it. All right, we'll see where we get.
Zach, you're in college still. Was there any green beer flowing on Coastal's campus today?
No. I mean, I saw some pictures and videos from this last weekend. I know there's a bunch of stuff going on this weekend, but on a school night, I don't think there's as much going on.
I did see something I can fit in with down at Coastal. I think
the ginger race.
Yeah, I'm there, baby. Like, come on, I fit the description. I got to know something. Is this like been a thing that people talk about? Where did the ginger race come from?
Oh, this is like the first year they've done it. I know, like I've seen like videos of like other places. Obviously, they do it, but first year Coastal's doing it, and it's in like some like the back streets of like frat houses and stuff. So it'll be interesting.
Very nice. That's gonna be a good time, I think. But importantly, welcome to the show, Trojan Joe, man. It's been a while since we've had you on. We had you on during football season when you guys went up against your favorite rivals there, right?
Yeah, we did, and I appreciate you bringing me on. I do want to, just on a serious note, Dom, when he was putting this show together, he invited us, and then he also invited Jag Nation Radio, and then we came back and accepted the bid. So then he had to rescind the invitation to South's podcast. So I just want to personally apologize for any emotional pain that might have caused all 7 of their fans. I know it hurts, but you're going to get through this. So all my best to the Fusackley staff down there rooting for their alma mater. I'm so sorry you didn't get to participate in the show tonight. I really do just feel terrible about that.
I'm not sure if they'll see that one live or hear that one later, but I like how that one was done.
They'll like it either way.
That was so much fun during the fall season. I'm glad that you've continued to let the hate flow through you for that one. We got Ben James jumping in. I know he's chomping at the bit to hear some A-State breakdown. We won't be spending as much time on them, but they did make the postseason, so we will be throwing them a shout out. I'm not sure. Troy's hatred for Arkansas State is a little less than the South Al guys, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we used to, it was us and State for a long time. We were the only schools really battling for championships in a lot of sports, particularly football. And luckily that's changed. There's a lot more parity in the league. So I can now go to Jonesboro, without fear of being kicked out of an IHOP or something like that. So they're pretty far down the list of schools that we dislike. But those boys in Mobile have a permanent place at number 1. That's for sure.
That's true. I don't think that's changing anytime soon either, right? I mean, I don't know. Is there anybody else that's even close for you, like Southern Miss popping up a little bit, or Louisiana? I don't know. I mean, you guys had some heat with Louisiana in baseball this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Troy fans don't like some others. We don't like UAB. We don't like Jack State. But as far as in the conference, we're pretty cool with everybody. We got under Marshall fans' skin because when Carlton Marshall broke the tackle record, we named our podcast episode "We Are Marshall," spelled like his last name, and they got really upset about that. And we didn't mean any offense. We also don't care. So when people get upset, we just enjoy it. But that was about as close as we've gotten any rivalry over there. But we'll see. Who knows? We don't know Old Dominion well enough yet. Maybe we'll hate them. We're willing to give it a try.
I'm going to give you full marks on the name of that podcast. That's phenomenal that you did that.
You. They did not appreciate it. They were not fans.
Well, you don't want it to happen. You got to do something about it, right? Tyler's Talking Sports. Those guys just broke down the entire field yesterday and went game by game and gave you the full bracket breakdown. So go find that episode, probably streaming on all platforms at this point, and certainly the video aspect, which was what I was taking part in yesterday. Those guys do a great job. So they're saying Troy to the Sweet 16. I can confirm. I looked at their bracket. as they did it and afterward, and that's where they've got them going. So, Joe, we'll see if you agree, and Zach, we'll definitely see if you agree as well as we jump along here. But let's get into the first stuff we want to talk about, because like I said, we've also got A-State versus St. Louis in the NIT. So last year, Arkansas State made the CBI tournament. That one was announced before the NIT. This year, they found out they weren't in there, so I think it was a pretty safe assumption that they were going to end up in the NIT. They did. They got a 3 seed out of it, which means they are the home team hosting St. Louis this Tuesday night. So if you're listening to this live, that's tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, guess what? Game's tonight. 9 Eastern, 8 Central time there in Jonesboro. I've had a great crowd all season, so I'd expect nothing less in this one. Ben took a bunch of my notes that he's been sharing on the YouTube stream. It is A-State's first NIT bid since 1991. I don't think Zach was alive anywhere close to that day. Right?
Nope. 2003.
Yep. So it's been a while since they've made the NIT. But, yeah, St. Louis leads the all-time series 10-1. That's not a great note. But they also haven't played since 2011. So I probably don't put too much weight into that statistic, leaning too heavily because of recency bias, which hasn't existed. And then he's saying the first postseason home game since 91. First time A-State in postseason back-to-back seasons since 88-89. Jeez, going back for all that. I see if I had a couple other notes here, but we can get into the net before we do that, because I think that's an interesting aspect with just how close these teams are in the net rankings. Arkansas State coming in at 94, St. Louis just 101. So, I mean, I don't know, guys. Just a quick assumption here on pretty much means we're going to get a good game, right?
I'll go first, since we've established that I'm Zach's elder by about 27,000 years. I'll just say I think a lot of it is like bowl games, and Zach can tell me if he agrees with this. I think when it comes to the postseason in basketball, that's not the big dance. It's a lot like going to the Duke's Mayo Bowl or whatever bowl you might go to. Who cares the most about it? Which team is there that's motivated to win? Whose fans are there that care if they win? If Arkansas State fans show up the way they've been showing up all season, I don't think St. Louis has a chance. I think they get run out of the building. They turn those waterfalls on in the stadium, and everybody has a great time. If they come in there and say, well, we don't really care that much about this, we wanted to do more, then you almost see like back when Alabama got beat by Utah when Saban was there in football, and it was a huge upset. Well, it's because, and at least from Alabama people's perspective, Alabama players didn't care anything about being there, and Utah fans did. Utah players wanted to win. So does Arkansas State care? Do their fans care? If they do, I'm not sure this thing's even close. I think by the end of the fourth quarter, we're talking about who's the official hot dog of Arkansas State athletics and giving somebody a free pizza at the Lost Pizza Company. But that's just my take on it. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you put it right. Like, it's more about who cares about it more. And St. Louis, they're going to care because they had Josh Hurts as their new head coach. He was the Indiana State head coach last year who went to the final of the NIT. And they also bring probably their two best players, Isaiah Swope and Robbie Avila. So, those guys are going to care, and they know what this tournament means. So I think it's more down to how much Arkansas State cares rather than which team cares more.
I think that's good. I got a couple notes that are a little bit more specific on the net that I didn't spell out here in this one. St. Louis, 0-3 in quad 1 games. Just 1-8 in quad 2 games. So a lot of their wins came against quad 3 and quad 4. So, yeah, they were winning the ones they were supposed to, but they weren't really all that competitive in the better games. Arkansas State, interestingly enough, 1-1 with quad 1 wins. As we know, they got that win over Memphis early in the season. 2-3 in quad 2, so pretty competitive there in most of those games. Just 4-4 in quad 3, 16-2 in quad 4. So they did lose 2 games in quad 4, which is definitely, surprising when you look back after the season that they've had. There is 3 players scoring and averaging double figures on both teams. However, for St. Louis, all of them are averaging over 17 points per game, where A-State's players are averaging all under 15 per game. So just some interesting aspects. But as we know, A-State's a shooting team. That's their strong point. If they're not hitting their shots, that's where they're going to fall and falter. But if they're hitting their shots at home in a game that they should win with a packed crowd, excitement, a team that is essentially working their way up, right? UCBI, NIT is NCAA tournament next for next year. Obviously, Trojan Joe doesn't think that, and he thinks the Trojans will return to form. But for A-State, they've signed a long-term deal for their coach. They've got guys coming back. They had a in-conference transfer in Kobe Julian, who ended up going over there to make them an even stronger starting five. And they had Zach? I mean, we talked about it. They had like the deepest bench throughout the entire season for the whole conference. I don't see any reason why. Ben had said it. They're favored by 4.5 points. I think that's probably good, and I almost agree with Joe. Like, if they're on tomorrow night, they could win by a lot more than that. I'm not saying they will, but they could if they play up to potential. So that's my thoughts there. Ben's saying he expects a rocking house in Jonesboro. I kind of expect the same. I mean, you got spring breaking everywhere. It's the weather's getting a little bit nicer, but it's not necessarily too hot to be going out and getting involved in a basketball game. So I expect the students to be around and pack in the house for that one. And if A-State wins, they will face either North Texas or Furman in the second round. That matchup would be a lot scarier to see, I think. I don't know if St. Louis is putting the fear in anyone. I mean, I don't know, Zach, probably a little bit more about the A-10 because of where you grew up and watched more basketball. Is the A-10 kind of where it's always been? Is it kind of down a little bit? What are your thoughts on the A-10 overall?
Yeah, I still think it's more of like one of the better mid-majors, definitely. Like, it's not like Mountain West, but it's up there. And like I said, I don't really know much about the A-10, but I know a lot about their players just because I'm from Indiana. So Indiana State head coach Shirts and those guys. So I've watched them a lot, and they're really good.
Yeah, I guess Jimerson is averaging like 18 points a game or something. That's pretty crazy. That's going to be the main standout there, but we know Pinion can go off from three, and you've got Todd and Julian over there as well, who should be able to help them stay in the game no matter what. All right, so before we go on, we've got the first place teams, as Joe alluded to start off the program. South Alabama was about this close, and I don't even know, like paper thin, from going to the postseason, but it was offered and then taken away, which I know Joe's having fun with, but I will say, unacceptable. I mean, I don't know how you allow that to happen as an organization who's trying to run a legitimate college basketball postseason tournament. Why are you not checking every aspect of who did what, who sent something to somebody, who told somebody to do something? Why is this getting such a mess? Also, on the other side of that, UC Riverside is the team that kind of fumbled all of this around. What aspect of this do they play, right? Like, they were showing up in both brackets, and that's where a lot of people started having questions. And then we got the news about South Alabama kind of getting screwed over there after a thing. But
wasn't that the story that the other team had accepted was at least considering accepting a bid to a non-sanctioned tournament, and therefore the NIT was not going to give them a bid? That to me is like when you're in college asking one sorority sister out, and then before she can say no, asking another one. I mean, at the end of the day, that should mean you're dateless. Okay, you should be by yourself at the cookout ordering hamburgers. I mean, that really is, and I will never defend that team in Mobile. I hope all the bad things in the world happen to them and nobody else. But I do think if you're kind of playing both sides of the fence, hoping to get your best deal from one tournament or the other, then really you should be out of consideration. If there are other schools that are saying, we are sold on playing in the NIT, or we're sold on playing in this other tournament, that's who you should go with, because these tournaments aren't seeded the same way as the big dance, and so you should reward that type of loyalty. That's my opinion. Again, I'm getting very dangerously close to saying something nice about those guys, so I'm not going to do it. But I do think that to me is ridiculous. And I mean, we're now in this situation where what are we supposed to say next? The NCAA should do something about it. They're just as inept as anybody else. So, I mean, I don't know that they have any right to call anybody and tell them they don't know what they're doing. So I wish there was somebody. I know, I know Pat McAfee says we should put Saban in charge of college athletics. Maybe we should. Maybe Nick Saban could sort all this out. But to me, I think you dance with the one who brung you, and if you try to dance with two at the same time, you end up by yourself. At least that's my experience. So I do hate to see that for any team except for this one.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. All right, like once you've said yes to one, you're staying there. I guess though we do see it in bowl season, right? I mean, I think I've heard that before. So and so accepts a bowl invite to somewhere. They put it out on social medias and everything else, and then all of a sudden it was never officially official, and then you see a different team. I think actually that's, when Troy was going up against, what would they have, Duke in a bowl game? Is that who they had played?
Yes, Birmingham, something bowl.
I think even you and I were talking, and I had told you that you were going to play someone else because that was what was official at the time, and it was unofficially official. And then when the actual thing came out, it was different because back behind the scenes, so-and-so was told it was going to be this team, and it wasn't. So I'm not saying it's unheard of, but when you get these things nailed down, like you said, if you told somebody you're moving on because they didn't accept the invite, too bad then. You might be on the outside looking in. But yeah, opinions from you guys on the commissioner's stance on that. Do you think he has been strong enough in some of these fight for our teams aspects? Because I've seen a lot of people think he is not fighting for Sunbelt overall enough. I don't know what you guys think on that. Zach, let's start with you about what you know about Keith Gill and what he said on either this aspect or just overall across all the sports.
I mean, I think overall, just for basketball in general, I think they're not putting enough time and effort and respect into Sunbelt basketball. I think we all know that it has potential to be one of the best mid-major conferences, and it was the last few years until this year. And I've seen people all over social media talk about how we need to start marketing it better and do all these things. And I quite frankly agree with them. Like, I think that, like I said, this has the potential to be one of the best mid-major conferences in the country, and we're not taking advantage of it.
Yeah. Joe, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I do understand, that Keith stood up there. Carl Benson did it before him and said the Sun Belt is going to succeed by being a football conference. And I understand that. McDonald's is a Big Mac restaurant, right? But they also sell McChickens. So every now and then you got to market the McChickens. And we are a football conference. That will always be what is most important, contrary to the belief of people down in Hattiesburg that all of a sudden want us to believe that collegiate baseball is the end-all, be-all because they happen to be good at it. The most important thing on every campus in this conference is football. The second most important thing, if you ask the athletic directors on these conferences, is men's basketball. And collegiate baseball is a distant third behind that. I don't care how good you are at it, unless you're UC Riverside, that is the case. So, but the fact of the matter is, what Keith has unfortunately done is, one, acted like he can just ignore the spring sports, which you can't. You've got to go out there and fight for it. And you can't go out there and just fight for your little pet schools. How many posts have y'all seen of Daddy Gill in the league office out there begging and pleading for JMU women to be allowed into the big dance? You never see that for anybody else. They wouldn't make a Facebook post for somebody to come put Troy's administration building out if it was on fire. But JMU all of a sudden gets left out of the women's basketball tournament, and we're all supposed to just wail and gnash our teeth and wear sackcloth. And I'm just not going to do it. We cannot play favorites other than hating that team in Mobile. That's okay. But everybody else should be treated the same. And I agree. I think the league office is ignoring a lot of these spring sports. And I think they have their favorites, the ones that they are going to go to bat for, and they have other schools they simply aren't. And those schools change from time to time. For a while, we all complained that it was App State, that Keith Gill was going to do whatever it took to get App State whatever they wanted. Now it seems like for whatever reason, App State's on the naughty stool with the rest of us, and y'all can't even y'all don't even show up in highlight videos anymore. So I don't really understand. Yeah, and that whole thing about Ball State pleading for JMU. Give me a freaking break, Ben James. Check your allies, my friend. Gondor has called for aid, and if Mac is what's coming over the side to help you save the kingdoms of men, you are in big trouble. So I don't want to hear any more about this Mac coach that said some nice things about JMU women's basket. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I will say, though, when you look at their record, you're like, they didn't get any postseason invite, right? But I think they did in the end, right? It was just not the NCAA, right? Or maybe,
Correct.
Zach, am I wrong on that? I think they got something in the end, didn't they?
I'm not sure. I know the Coastal women got invited to the NIT, but okay. I'm not sure about JMU.
I think they're going to that. I think they should be invited to go down to Mobile and play South's men's team because they'd probably blow them out. I think that'd be a heck of a game. I'd pay-per-view that. I don't know about you boys.
Oh, man. I would just because you told me to, I would do it. But, yeah, I don't know enough about the strength of the conference overall on the women's side of things. I think that's probably what's hurting them because there's some really bad teams at the bottom of the women's teams.
I think I saw their I think I saw their net rating or their Ken Palm or one of them, and they were pretty high for a mid-major school.
Oh, okay. Well then,
at the men level, you usually don't see mid-major teams ranked as high as they were.
Okay, so there seems to be the argument there that our record was good, but it wasn't good in a terrible conference. It was good in a good conference. So, and then Ben James, JMU made the women's basketball invitational. So WBIT, and there's too many letters in that one. I like the 3-letter ones. It's just a little easier to take there. It's everything else is just too much. All right. So looking back at the tournament, though, those 4 teams that all tied for first were all co-champions. We're the last ones standing, right? Marshall and ODU had their shots. ODU had probably the best run of any team besides Troy in the basketball tournament, and it was kind of fitting that Troy is the one who ended their run and started their own to get into this. And, Joe, we will apologize. Neither Zach or I had Troy winning a single game in this tournament, so there you go.
Well, I'd love to tell you both you boys are real clever, and Zach's going to a great school up there in Coastal, but we didn't win a single game last year, either men's or women's in the tournament. So it's not like you were reinventing the wheel. I will say one important thing, and if this derails us, feel free just to go back to where you're going. It's your show. I do think there's been so much talk about the format. Even talk outside of like Sunbelt Uncensored Facebook group, which is just a bunch of nonsense. But even like at ESPN, people are going, isn't this interesting what the Sunbelt is doing, which is what you want from a mid-major conference. I think it's interesting that the schools that you saw end up in the tournament were the 3 and 4 seed who, when they got to play in the semis, had a game under their belt against a team that was tired. Of course, in our case, and I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to punish us for having to play ODU after they had played 17,000 games or whatever it was. That's not our fault. Call Keith Gill about it, right? Your congressman. But the fact is, we had a game underneath our belt, whereas JMU and that school in Mobile had both sat for a long time. A week is a long time to not play Division I level basketball and then be expected to play a pretty good team in your conference, potentially, as this worked out, the 3rd and 4th best team in your conference. I would not be shocked. And a lot of people want to change this format already. I think you're going to need 5 years worth of evidence before you can convince anybody to do that. It would not shock me, though, if in 4 or 5 years we're sitting here on this same podcast going, the 3rd and 4th team always makes it to the championship because they always have one game under their belt. They freshen up, and they're always beating a 1 and 2 team that is rusty. That would not shock me at all. I enjoy this format, but I certainly understand the complaint. And I think it's something you just got to watch and see, is this something that happens every single year, or was this a fluke? But I don't think it hurts you to have one game under your belt before you get to the semis. I think it's a help.
I know Zach and I kind of went over it, but one thing that I've seen in the past is, this format's stupid. None of the teams at the bottom stand a chance. Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we've been saying is that's fine. If you're going to go and have a tournament, my thought process is not all the teams should make it. When you finish at the bottom of the conference, you shouldn't even be going. So, yeah, to make your path the most difficult path to get to a championship is perfectly okay with me. If you run the gauntlet to win 6 or 7 games in a row to get there, then you deserve it. But if you don't, that's where you were all season. So why are you crying? It's impossible for the 13th seed to win. Yeah, it should be. I don't know why we'd be rewarding a team like that. So, yeah, this rewards the teams at the top, but I do understand what you're saying there, Joe, with, 3 and 4, probably the best position because of what you said. Tired teams, they could be in rhythm. There's that argument that the team coming in is it in a rhythm where 3 and 4 are also kind of taking a smaller break, but it's still a break. But yeah, once they maybe get that first game under their belt, now they're warmed up going into the 1 and 2 seeds. But yeah, I mean, nonetheless, congratulations to the Trojans as they claimed the tournament title, the only one that matters, right? That co-champion crap is out the door now. We have an official tournament champion, a conference champion who's going to represent us in the NCAA tournament. Zach, you got any thoughts on that aspect as well?
No, I mean, I think I said this in the last show. In the WCC, they do a similar format, but Gonzaga and St. Mary's are always the 1 and 2 seed, but that's because they're so much better than the rest of the league. So the 1 and the 2 seed in that league are always going to be fighting for the championship. So that it works in that conference. But being, like he said, the 1 and 2 seed here is, I think, actually hurts because the league is so deep that, quite frankly, almost anyone could win this. So, and then you get one of these teams in rhythm, get them warmed up, and you're ice cold sitting for a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. That just hurts you even more.
Yeah. I think the only thing that this helps with is if you've got a guy who's, a superstar too, that's kind of banged up a little bit. It's the only time I want to see my 1 and 2 seeds sit longer so that those guys can get healthy. Otherwise, I'm with you guys. I want my shooters to stay in rhythm at, as Joe said, the D1 level competition. You can try and practice it all you want, but that's not game speed. So until you do that, that's going to be a little bit of a hindrance. Okay, the reason that we are all here tonight, for the most part, besides Ben James, who came only for the Arkansas State coverage, he's probably turning the show off now. But we have the number 3 seed in the tournament, one of 4 number 3 seeds, I guess, when you break it down that way. Kentucky, who's also number 18 in the country overall, going up against our best team in the Troy Trojans. You got a 14 seed. I know we had Tom Stott on, and we were hoping for a 13 seed, right? He said if enough dominoes fell that they could have snuck in there at a 13, but didn't have enough of those teams lose, unfortunately, to jump up there into a 13 seed. They've been placed in the Midwest region. They play Friday night at 7:10 Eastern, 6:10 Central Time in Milwaukee. But for those of us who are not traveling, we can watch it on CBS. So, Joe, you're not traveling up there to Milwaukee, are you?
I am not. No, I have spent enough time in the cheese state in my life. I will not be going up there. I do wish them the best, but I will not be traveling up. It'll be hard to convince me not to. Should we beat Kentucky, and especially if we end up then going against like a Texas or Xavier, who will potentially be coming in. Then I might just have to tell the wife I've got a work conference or something. Hopefully she's not watching this show. She's a Colorado fan, so she's probably like watching Prime sell sunglasses or something. But yeah, I might have to go up then. But I think for this one, I will stay at the house and be rooting for the Trojans here from Alabama.
Do you have some people that that are going up at all though?
I have heard of a few. There's a crowd. There's a Troy crowd that is everything. I always joke if Troy headed up and played tiddlywinks against the University of Alaska Anchorage, there'd be 5 or 10 people in Cardinal there. Troy's got a serious traveling crew, and they will be there. And this is certainly, this Troy team will not lose for lack of any fan support. There will definitely, I'm sure we will be outnumbered by the Kentucky fans, but there will be Troy fans in the building, and I'd take one Troy fan over 100 Kentucky fans any day of the week.
I'll agree with that. I haven't run into any Kentucky fans I've been a big fan of myself. I haven't had any real problems either, I guess. I don't know. Zach, you probably ran into more Kentucky fans. What do you know about them?
My childhood best friend since like 3 years old is a Kentucky diehard fan. So
okay.
Yeah, I've always
that's the end of that friendship, Zach. Conference before friends.
I've always kind of rooted against Kentucky always, just so I could make fun of them. So this just gives me even more to root for.
There we go. I like that. All right, so let's break this one down a little bit further, and we'll spend, again, a little bit more time on this one than the previous one. So for Troy's net, they came in at 99 overall. So not the greatest, but still in the top 100. In quad 1, 0-3, quad 2, 2-1. So good there in quad 2. Quad 3, 5-3, quad 4, 14-3 overall. So I don't know if anything blows you away on any aspect. I mean, I'm not necessarily thinking a lot of Sunbelt schools would do great in most quad 1 matchups, which they did not this year. But I don't know, any thoughts on just that aspect of what you're seeing there?
No, it's just, I mean, that's what you're going to see from a lot of these mid-major teams. Not a good quad 1 record, maybe not even a good quad 2 record, but really good quad 3 and quad 4 records.
And the worst thing that you go look at our schedule. The worst thing is that the Merrimack loss.
Yes,
that's the one thing that's just absolutely unforgivable. But I mean, in the same way, and I've said this on your show. I've said it on Troy Boyz a million times. The worst disease John Summerall ever gave us was this idea that Troy fans have now of like, well, we never would have won 2 conference titles had we not gone to App State and lost to a Hail Mary. And so I don't want to give into that too much, but I do think there are times, especially in basketball, where it is good to get your block knocked off a little bit by a team that you're supposed to beat. Because then you give a chance for a guy like Scott Cross, who's an experienced basketball coach, to go, well, guys, you can either listen to me and we can succeed, or you can do what you want to do and try to play playground basketball and lose to Merrimack. Your choice. And so, you really then have – if all you have is success, it becomes a lot easier for players to go, well, let's just keep doing what we want to do because it's working. So sometimes a little bit of failure, especially against a team that you shouldn't have failed against, can work out for you.
Yeah, I like that thought process, and I do like what you just alluded to with the football aspect. Got to lose that game to have the season you end up having in the end. I know you said you don't love that thought process, but last episode we had Thomas Dodd on, and he alluded to that exact thing with a quad 4 loss to Louisiana. Oh, guess what they've done since that quad 4 loss to Louisiana? Just gone on a 6-game win streak, the longest of the season, claimed the Sunbelt regular season title, and now are going to go up in the matchup against Kentucky. So sometimes those losses do mean something, and they kind of wake you up and shake you when you need to be shaken in order to get you on the right path. And it looks like Troy is that team, right? Maybe a team of destiny. Maybe too early to say that, but I mean, they had a 5-game win streak earlier in the year, but this 6-game win streak they're currently on is the longest they have had all season as they go into the NCAA tournament, where guess what? You have to go streaking if you want to advance, right? So we'll see if that plays out. I think pretty much those are my only notes. One thing that I'll mention here is they did have a common opponent. Both Troy and Kentucky played Arkansas this year. Troy lost 65-49, a 16-point differential, while Kentucky, lost 89-79, which is only 10 points. But, I mean, that 6-point difference is kind of throw it out the window. Both teams lost to that same Razorbacks team. All right, Kentucky, once again, number 18 in the country overall. Their net is 14, but that's aided greatly by playing in a conference that put 14 teams into the NCAA tournament, right? It was an SEC the most.
Didn't they put a team in that's 6-12?
Something crazy. Way too much respect extended to the SEC, if you ask me. Way too much.
Overall, he does what he wants
in every sport.
Yeah. Quad 1, 11-10. Obviously, again, playing in the SEC, they're going to have a ton of quad 1 games, but there were only one game over 500 in those quad 1 games. Quad 2, just 1-1. Quad 3 and 4, no problems, right? 10-0 overall with those two quads combined. 4-0 in the Quad 3 and 6-0 in the Quad 4. That's kind of what you'd expect out of a Kentucky team. So, you see the 18 beside their name. You see net 14 overall. But once I break this down and I look at these quad victories and losses, I'm not so scared of the Kentucky Wildcats as it may be. I don't know what you guys think about this breakdown. Is it really as impressive as, those numbers beside the name have you believe, or once you look at this a little deeper, you're just like, okay, this is kind of not scary?
I think they're really good. We're going to see like Quad 3, Quad 4. You can't have Quad 3 and Quad 4 losses at the Power 5 level and expect to get in the tournament unless your name's like North Carolina or Texas, maybe Xavier too. But you can't lose those games, so that's easy. And then 11 and 10 Quad 1. They're battle tested more than almost anyone in the country playing in the SEC. I think the numbers are fine.
Yep,
Joe?
This is Kentucky. Kentucky teams are never that bad. I don't think this is a Kentucky team that is as good as maybe people are used to seeing. People who don't follow basketball a lot, I think, are going to be a lot more scared of this logo than maybe they should be.
Yes.
But they are a good team. And I've got, I don't know when they might be appropriate, but I actually have the 5 keys for Troy to beat Kentucky, which I think fall right in line with what you're seeing here with their results throughout the season.
Save that for I got a slide coming up for that one that'll be perfect because it has other factors, and I'll let you name some of that. We're going to go to kind of the superstar as it may be for both teams so that everyone can get familiar with that aspect. Obviously, guard Tayton Connerway, the Sunbelt Player of the Year, 14.3 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, assist at 4.8, and steals at 2.9. Just an incredibly well-rounded player, especially when you look at his statistical aspect versus the top player from Kentucky, as we'll see it here in just a minute. Joe, any words about Mr. Tayton Connerway?
He's just, not only is he great this year, I think when you compare this season to a lot of Troy players who've played basketball for us, I don't know that he doesn't skyrocket, at least from a one-season sample, to being kind of on the Mount Rushmore of Troy basketball. He is very, very good. He's a great leader. He plays something like 33 minutes a game, as an absolute gamer, and is stuck in there and has just been ridiculously good for us and may even get, fingers crossed. He did play JUCO ball. So it's possible that the rest of the Sun Belt might get to see Mr. Connerway one more year playing in those beautiful Cardinal jerseys. But we'll have to see about that. But he's had an absolutely great year and is a huge testament to Scott Cross and the way he's built this program, evenly divided between upper and underclassmen to allow for performance and development. So, but Tayton really deserves all the credit in the world. And you could see it in the tournament when the team needed him. He came out there and put the team on his back. So I'm really proud of the way that he played. And he'll certainly need to have a big game in order for us to beat a team like Kentucky.
Zach, I think you had Connerway on your, if I'm mistaken, you can correct me. You have him on your short list for Sunbelt Player of the Year before the season started?
Yeah, he was my pick, actually.
Okay, there you go.
So
no.
I stayed with the trend of players going from Sixth Man of the Year to the Conference Player of the Year because Terrence Edwards did it as well. So kind of stuck with that trend.
See, somebody hire this guy. Zach knows what the hell he's talking about, folks. So there's a reason to tune into this channel, even though, somebody got one more pick correct in the tournament than you did, Zach. So just a little feather in the cap there. Not that either one of us did well at all, because neither one of us had the champion, as we talked to you about, Joe. But
Hey, you didn't even have either team in the championship game. At least I had one.
That's true. That's a good point. Yep, I did not pick A-State to be in the championship game. So yeah, there we go. But you have any other words about Connerway here before we look at the Kentucky side of things?
I mean, I found out last night that he was actually a walk-on at a JUCO. He wasn't just a JUCO player.
Wow.
He tried out at a JUCO, made the team as a walk-on, and then transferred to Troy. So a little interesting there.
Yeah, I did not know that. I like him even more now. I love the walk-on aspect, man. That's something that isn't easy to do anymore now, especially with the transfer portal. Almost impossible to kind of succeed from that aspect. So even a cooler little aspect to hark on there. Okay, Otega Owe. And the one thing that stuck out to me between these two players is they both really have that clutch gene, right? I mean, Owe helped win, who was it in the SEC tournament? He came down and scored with like 1 point some odd seconds left. Zach, you remember who that was?
I know he did. He hit it like a buzzer beater at Arkansas or at Oklahoma, which is his former team.
That's right. Yeah, that's crazy too, right? So yeah, that place was going nuts because some player had just hit some shot to take the lead with 4-something seconds left, and he comes all the way down all by himself, coast to coast, lays it in with 1 point something seconds left, and won him the game there. So an exciting player to watch. He's definitely a little bit bigger than Conaway. He's not a lot bigger, but he's a little bit bigger. He's definitely noticeable size-wise. He's going to be, and Ben James has been saying that he thinks Kentucky will take this game because of the size difference and just kind of being too powerful. But we'll see. We'll see. Owe has 16.2 points per game, 4.6 rebounds per game, 1.6 assists, and 1.6 steals. So he's at least consistent in those last two things there. But yeah, he's kind of their top player. As it looks right now, he was named All SEC Conference second team. Did you guys have any notes specifically on Owe? Because we'll get to some other guys too if you've got other players besides him to talk about as well.
I mean, I don't really. I just know, like you said, he's a big, like physical guard, like a bully ball type of guard, and it's going to be hard to keep just one body on him.
Yeah, I think he's. I don't know if anyone has it, but I think he's like 6'4", 200+ pounds or something like that. So,
yeah, and we talked about it, but we talked about it before we came on air. I mean, this is not what you expect to see. Maybe if you don't follow Kentucky basketball, you're used to seeing their star player be in the 20s, in points per game, and just being a real kind of hot shot. He's not that, but he's still just as dangerous. And he's absolutely orchestrates this offense, and he's certainly going to be a problem all night. It's interesting. He reminds me a lot, and I can't think of his name, so this will be great. It'll give a reason for James Madison fans to be mad, which they love. But he reminds me a lot of number 0, who came off the bench for James Madison in the tournament. Just a guy that's kind of all over the floor, can do a little bit of everything. So really just an impressive player.
Was that Zach? Was that Bickerstaff? Is that who we're thinking of? Well, you look that up. We'll jump over and we'll let Joe talk about some of the other guys here. Miles Rigsby and his brother also, just kind of missed out being. I just wanted the graphic to be able to be seen, right? I could have fit the whole rotation on there. It would have been so tiny you couldn't make any of it out. So that's why there's only 3 players listed, because you could go with the whole starting lineup here. But Miles Rigsby, forward, Forrest Thomas Dodd, obviously, as we just had him on the show last week, expect big things from him. And forward Jackson Fields, all listed here. And Rigsby and Dodd just under double digits there at 9.8, but Rigsby was 12 points per game. But Dodd sticks out with that 6.8 rebounds per game, and that's what we'll talk about here in a little bit is just how strong defensively Troy is and why there could be a big tool in their tool belt against Kentucky. Zach, did you find out who 0 was for JMU last year?
Last year was Xavier Brown. This year it's Mark Freeman.
Gotcha.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Xavier Brown. Yep. Xavier Brown had a pretty good year this year for him too, didn't he?
Yep, he was one of the only guys that stayed around JMU and had a pretty solid year.
Well, yeah. Joe, do you have anybody specific you want to mention who's either not shown or someone you want to focus on more of these 3 on the screen right now?
No, I mean, Jackson Fields, going into the conference tournament was like our 8th best 3-point shooter. And then I don't know if he just got a hold of the space juice from Space Jam or what happened to him. But all of a sudden he became just killer from outside the 3-point line. The pride of Missouri City, Texas, really came alive from 3, and we're going to need him to continue that because really putting up those kind of shots, he put an end to a lot of positive momentum from teams we were playing just by going down and hitting threes and kind of allowing us to reset without using those valuable timeouts. So I was really impressed with him. And maybe he just is one of those kind of players, big players playing big time games. Maybe he's been waiting kind of for the postseason, but he has looked like a different guy, certainly as a 3-point shooter in the postseason than he did the whole regular season.
I think that goes toward that aspect, man. This team is heating up at the right time. And like you said, maybe some unsung heroes from earlier on are going to show their face and be noticed a little bit more. Not that Jackson Fields wasn't pretty consistently good throughout the season, but like you said, that 3-point shooting aspect jumping up there. Zach, anything to mention on these guys or anybody else on the Troy roster?
I mean, I thought even though his stats aren't good, Cooper Campbell, the freshman, I think he's been good, especially in the tournament. I know, like I said, he didn't put up the best stats, but he's just everywhere every time I watch them. And I actually saw on a Kentucky group, they posted a picture of Thomas Dowd, and they were like, this guy's about to go 9 for 12 from 3 and go crazy. He's going to be the Doug Eater. I don't know if you remember him from St. Peter's. And then people in the comments were like, well, this dude only shoots like 30% from 3 and he's only made like this many threes. And they were like, that's exactly my point. He's about good for 60% against us.
That's what's crazy, man. A guy his size shooting decently from – I mean, obviously everybody wants to shoot better than that, but his percentage across the team is one of the better ones, really. I would love to see Thomas go off and have a game, man, especially after having him on the show. Get that syndicate bump to exist over here in basketball as we've had it exist in baseball for a little bit. So I love that note, Zach, because that is a good point. Like there's always somebody who steps up and scares somebody else. Also, Joe, do you know Joey Caraway who says "Go Troy"? 3 smoking dudes is on his logo. I don't know if that's
no. I'm afraid I don't. Maybe he's a fan of the podcast and he's commenting on our looks. I don't know, but no, I don't. Joey and I are not acquainted, but I happen to agree with him. So go Trojans.
Yeah, there we go. And 3 smoking dudes. I don't know if that's a restaurant or something he does on the side, but I'm going to be checking that out after the show. I got to see what that's about. If that's a barbecue joint or something, I'm down. All right, jumping over to the Kentucky Wildcats. As we said, we've got a lot more players averaging in the double figures across the board, which isn't ultimately surprising, right? We've got a traditional blue blood in the SEC conference. Jackson Robinson, 13 points per game. Lamont Butler, also a guard, 11.5 points per game. And guard Kobe Brea, I think is probably how you pronounce that, is also sitting there at 11.5 points. I don't know. I mean, rebound-wise, nothing's crazy here. You got 3.5, 2.8, 3.2 for these guys, and nothing else is massively sticking out to me. But, again, they score a lot of points. So it's really and truly kind of that offense versus defense matchup. Did either of you had any notes specifically that you wanted to mention on the Wildcats?
Yeah, I don't see Amari Williams. That's the only player I don't see. He plays a lot of minutes for Kentucky. He's not great behind the 3-point line, but that's because he's a literal giant. He's like 9.5 feet tall, I think. The good news is if he gets out of position, he's just jacking up bricks. He's not great. He's not a modern day NBA big man where he can shoot threes. I think he might be like 1 of 4 behind the arc all year. So if Troy gets him out of position, they should let him take shots. Don't waste time going out there to guard him. And don't let him just live in the paint either. He's so big. He's so physical. He can absolutely hurt you. And, I hope Coach Cross does whatever he has to do, bring a slingshot, whatever it takes. But we can't let that guy beat us with his size for sure.
Nice. Zach?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Amari Williams, he's also like an elite passer for a big man, like an elite passer. So, like he said, just let him shoot. I would like sag off him if he's out there. Don't let him pick passes off because if you press him, I mean, he's going to find a way to get the ball out of his hands. So that, and then Lamont Butler, he's kind of dealt with a shoulder injury all year, but it sounds like he's going to be good to go. He hit that big shot for San Diego State a few years ago, sent him to the Final Four. So that's a guy that's really experienced. And then Kobe Brea is maybe the best shooter in the country. Like, you cannot leave that guy 6 inches of space or he's hitting a 3. So they're gonna have to chase him around everywhere.
Is he a Curry like style shooter? Like he'll pull up way behind the arc too, or is he kind of at least more traditional in that sense?
He's more off ball, definitely, but like he can shoot from pretty much anywhere.
Interesting. Warren's got a note here. Regular season to tournament officiating going to affect the game. Go Troy. Hopefully not. I think you're going to see the best of the best officials, and I don't think that Troy or any team really is going to play a game that's any different from how they played throughout the season, and I think that will become a less of an aspect. But, yeah, we had some questions, and we talked about that last show about some of the officiating that we had seen in the conference tournament there as it was. But, you got to think, if the fact is true that we share officials with the SEC for football, they probably share officials for basketball. So, it's at least somewhat consistent in that regard. So we'll see what happens here. Probably going to get Big Ten officials or somebody who hasn't seen either team all season to try and keep it as fair as they can. I know that's, I think, typically what they do when it comes time to play anything in the postseason for the NCAA. Okay, some other factors listed here, but I'm going to let Joe start off with some reasonings why he thinks the Trojans can take down number 18 Kentucky here on Friday night.
Yeah, I started with a list of 5 things we needed to do to beat Kentucky. And then since it's tournament time, I ended up with 5 things that are on the outside looking in. So these are important, but they're OLIs. We've talked about a lot of them, so I'll kind of speed through. The first OLI, we won our tournament, so we didn't need our league commissioner to go all over social media arguing for us to be in it. OLI number 2, Thomas Dowd exudes swag. He needs to bring the Pell Avenue swagger to the big dance. I mean, that guy is you can just tell he's a good time. Wherever, if he's not in the library, I'm betting he's at a local watering hole. He just seems like a dude who's got it. OLI number 3, we talked about Amari Williams. OLI number 4, Kentucky does score about 10 more points per game than Troy so far this season. We're not going to beat them in an arm race, obviously. So we got to play defense and make them, fight us in a phone booth, and we have to. And the outside looking in number 5 is literally the University of South Alabama because they are on the outside looking in. As far as the real top 5, we need our bench players who were really instrumental all season long to play better than they did in the conference tournament. And I'm really, I'm calling you guys out. Theo Zhang and Victor Valdez, I do not believe they had the conference tournaments that they wanted to have. They did not have the same kind of impact, and I would love to see them play better in this game. We talked about slowing down Ortega. We absolutely have to do that. You can't stop a player like that, but you can't let him beat you single-handedly. We've been a little better this season rebounding than Kentucky. We've got to win that battle, give ourselves extra chances. We talked about Jackson Field shooting so well. And the last thing, this shouldn't surprise anybody who's watching this podcast that's followed basketball at all, and that is that we need Tatum Conaway to find the nearest phone booth to the Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee, put on his Superman gear, and just put the team on his back. That's what he's done all year. He is an absolute weapon. And we can't do it without him. I mean, the fact of the matter is if he has a down night, you can go ahead and count us out. But I think if he comes out and is playing hot and is feeling good, then I wouldn't bet against Troy. I'm not saying, I think they're definitely going to win, but I wouldn't put your kid's child fund against it because he's just a great player. He knows how to win. He knows how to shoot. So those are kind of my big keys. We've got to get all of our guys kind of rolling as one. And if we do, this could be one of those stories that we've where David beats Goliath. So, and I would love for that to be the case.
Absolutely. Tyler Blackburn saying he's laughing, saying you guys are underestimating Kentucky. Well, I don't think we're underestimating, but I will say what Joe has said here too, is this isn't your typical Kentucky completely dominant, expected to win the tournament title type of team. At least to me, it's not. Zach, I don't know. You take it from there, whether you think maybe that's the case, but also any other factors besides the ones listed here, or maybe you touch on something specific on the ones on the screen.
I mean, yeah, I don't necessarily think we're underestimating Kentucky. I'll say I think they're going to win, but do I want them to win? No, obviously. This is going to be offense strength on strength. Offense for Kentucky versus Troy's defense. Troy's defense is ranked 71st in KenPom, and Kentucky's offense is ranked 8th in KenPom. And then Troy has a not so great offense, and Kentucky has a not so great defense. So this is truly strength on strength. They're going to have to slow this Kentucky offense down. It's going to have to be a grit and grind type of game if they want to win. And then also, Mark Pope isn't necessarily known for being good in the tournament. I don't know if he's made it out of the first round. And then we've seen Kentucky over the last few years. I know it's not the same players or the same coach, but I don't think they've made it to a second weekend since I believe it was 2018 or 2019. So, I mean, I know, like I said, it's not the same players, but the pressure is still on them. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, you hear it all the time. Defense wins championships, right? So there's one factor that you can say as a, it's your cliched thing, but an aspect of this that could be at play. We've talked about the strength on strength and everything else. So Troy sitting there 25th overall in points. That should be, points allowed. That's correct. So 25th overall in points allowed, and Kentucky 4th overall in points scored. Troy 30th overall in rebounds. So they're way up there. UK 25th overall in field goal percentage. So certainly Kentucky the better shooting team. As Trojan Joe mentioned, you guys are going to have Connerway, Dodd, probably at least one of the Rigsby brothers, and some bench players come up there and be shooting the ball pretty efficiently, obviously, to win this one. But if they're winning the battles down low and getting the ball in their hands more often, that could be what leads to some of those points. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what plays out more there. Now that we've done that, we've come to the last slide I have. Doesn't mean it's the last portion of the show necessarily. This is the Midwest region. The winner of Kentucky versus Troy will play the winner of Illinois and Texas or Xavier. But I don't know. Let's just do a quick thought process on, let's say Troy makes it out. Who do you think they're seeing in the next round? Joe, let's go with you first. So just who you want to see and who you think you'd see, maybe if it's different.
I think I picked Xavier. I think Xavier kind of has that pedigree. And I think that either of those teams, Xavier or Texas, if we started talking about what if Troy makes a magical win against Kentucky, how do we get another magical win? I think you want to get a team that's just played another tough game, which both Xavier or Texas would be coming off that. So I would take either one of those. But my pick right now would be Xavier. And I happen to feel like if we somehow got past Kentucky, I think I don't know that we would stand a great shot against Xavier, but I think they would be our best shot at advancing even further. And if we did, we would never leave the rest of the Sun Belt alone about it. So I would just root for us this one game, because if we make it any further, it's just going to be obnoxious.
That's okay. That's what you get to do if you win. Zach, what are you thinking on that top part? What did you I guess, did you already do a bracket already? Is at this point, Zach, or are you still waiting?
I mean, in my head a little bit, I've done some, but I haven't officially put some out. But I think we'll probably see Illinois if they beat Kentucky. But I think that's the last team you want to see. That's a team that, if they're hot, they can beat probably anyone in the country. They're that good. But I mean, they've been really consistent all year. The team you want to see is probably, like you said, Xavier. They don't really jump out to me. No really superstar player. Texas has Trey Johnson, a freshman who's probably going to go top 10 in the draft, and then some other guys that can really score the ball. So, I mean, I think I'd probably want to see Xavier out of those three. But if they beat Kentucky, I'd probably see Illinois. And if they somehow get to the Sweet 16, I might end up going, because it'll be in Indianapolis. The Midwest Regional is in Indy.
There we go. Does anybody think that if they got past Kentucky, I mean, it's hard to say the game is easier, but I mean, didn't they just play a tougher opponent, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Zach, we'll start with you first on that one.
I think, yeah, probably. But I think, like I said, I think Illinois can present some really tough issues with Yakachonis, who's going to be a top 5 pick. with Ivasic, who's a massive man down there at center, with Will Riley, who's like a 6'10" guard that can really score the ball, that might be a first-round pick as well. So, like I said, I think they can beat almost any team in the country if they're playing up to their standards. But if they get Texas or Xavier, that's definitely an easier game than Kentucky.
Joe, thoughts on that? Would you think that you think you have a better chance against any of those three teams than you would against Kentucky? Is the first one the toughest one here?
I mean, I do. I think kind of sure numerically. I worry a lot about momentum. I think momentum in college athletics means so much. Let's go back to sunbelt football season. ULM takes UAB's old head coach and most of UAB's old roster, goes and plays UAB, beats them like a worn-out drum, and all of a sudden, all you heard about on Sunbelt Uncensored, they had, do you know how many people in Monroe, Louisiana had to buy an internet connection to get on Facebook and talk about how great ULM was for 5.5 days? But then the problem is, you did it once, and that's great. Now you have to do it on Saturday. And then next Saturday, you have to do it again. And then you have to do it Thursday night. And then you have to do it a week from that. At some point, Cinderella's run out of steam because it stops being this magical thing and it starts being, can you methodically beat these teams? Because you're going to run out of the fairy dust initially. And so that would be my only question is, can Troy, take this experience that, let's say Troy beats a team like Kentucky, there's going to be a huge burst of energy from the fan base. The team's going to love it. How do you handle it? How does Coach Cross handle it? Do you celebrate it because it's a big thing and then take the next step? Or does this become your whole turn? Hey, we beat Kentucky. Who cares what happens next? This is always going to be as far as Troy has gotten, and we're going to hang a banner next year, and that's all that matters. So I think that's really, to me, what it comes down to. I don't even know that it matters as much as the athlete.
I see what you did there when you said take the next step. I see what you did there. Take the stairs, as they say.
Yeah, Hey, don't eat into that now. Coach Cross has to pay me every time I say that. So you're eating into my $5 here.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I mean, now you got the battle between who said it first with no, I know it was Scott Cross, by the way, but App State's using that moniker with Coach Kearns as well. So when you get to the postseason, you're the only one who's left that can say it. Warren says, is there a chance Kentucky overlooks Troy? I don't know if you want to say overlooks, but yeah, I mean, is there that aspect of these guys come from the Sunbelt? Sunbelt's not a great basketball conference. The fan base and some of the kids on the team are thinking we're gonna pretty easily beat these guys, and they think they're gonna waltz in and waltz out with a win. I mean, I'm sure there's at least one or two guys on the team that are gonna think that. I don't know. You get punched in the mouth early though. Like if Troy goes up 12-2 early and quick, I think you wake up in that aspect, and there's plenty of time in a basketball game, to turn that around. I don't know if Troy's going to catch anybody off guard. Anybody think that's going to be the case there?
I don't think that happens in a tournament. I think that's Troy fans are very much football aligned people. I think it happens in football because teams game 3 just doesn't seem to matter yet, and so it's game 3 and we're bringing them into our house and everything's going to be fine and we're just going to win. And then all of a sudden you've lost 24-21 if you're LSU. In this, the coach always has the ability to remind you, like, hey, you guys might think that you're better than Troy, but lose this game and you're going to be thinking you're better than Troy back in Lexington because that's all it takes. Whereas, in other sports, you can lose the game you're not supposed to lose, and then you still have more opportunities. So I think that's less of a danger from my perspective, but I hope I'm wrong. I'm going to make a burner Twitter account and spend the rest of my week just telling Kentucky players, like, you guys are so great. Don't even worry about it. I wouldn't practice. Practice is dumb. Like whatever it takes to get these guys distracted, I'm willing to do it. So,
yeah. Zach, thoughts on either overlook or just anything else dealing with a tournament style game like this?
Yeah, I don't think they're not going to overlook him, especially like I said with Mark Pope. Never really done it in March. He knows what it's like to get upset over and over again, and he knows what it's like to go home losing a game that you definitely should have won. So he's going to have his team ready. He was on the field of 68 last night, like right after it got announced they were playing Troy, and he was like, "Oh, I already know this team's like an elite offensive rebounding team. This team is 7th in the country in steals." Like he already knew like quite a bit of stuff. He said obviously he didn't know too much, but he knew more than maybe a lot of people would have thought. And he basically said, like, I'm going to have to get my team ready to go because this is not like not going to be the easiest game. So I think it won't be overlooked, but you never know. Maybe some of the players do, but I think the coaches will do everything in their power not to overlook this team.
I think I agree with that. But that's the part that you're hoping like Troy overcomes, right? The hunger, the fact they want to prove that they belong and everything else. Like you hope that prevails. Connor Way, again, like Zach had alluded to earlier, was a walk-on to start with this whole thing. So, like, there's going to be an aspect of him to prove it on the big national stage while everybody's literally watching you compete on national television, which will be pretty cool for him and the rest of the team, obviously. That kind of wraps up as far as our breakdown is concerned, but I'm sure you guys have some teams across your brackets if we want to spend a few minutes just talking about this, or the fact that, like, how the hell did UNC and Texas make it into this bracket in the first place? Whatever you guys want to go off on. Zach, I'll start with you there. I know you have some feelings. Probably, what was it? Indiana got left out of this field, right?
Yeah, that's fine with me, though. I ain't complaining.
I know, but I figure you've heard some thought processes from some friends and family up that way.
I mean, they should have been in. Texas, yeah. North Carolina, and maybe even Xavier. They all should have been out. I think West Virginia got hosed, Indiana got hosed, and probably Boise State got hosed too. But in terms of the bracket, I like UC San Diego over Michigan. Michigan is just really. I know they've had some really bad losses. I know they won the Big Ten tournament, and they don't have like a traditional point guard. And UC San Diego is one of the best shooting teams in the country. They're hot. I think they're 30-4. Like that's no joke. Yeah. And then I know I'm going to sound like a little bit of a homer here, but I like Purdue's path, honestly. High Point is going to be obviously a tough game. I think that's going to be a close game that they're going to have to worry about. I mean, they've lost 6 of their last 9. Purdue has, so they're going to have to get some things together. But they get past High Point, they get Clemson and McNeese. I mean, like I said, another tough game, but I think both of those games are really winnable for Purdue. And then Gonzaga or Houston. I mean, me personally on my bracket, Gonzaga is going for 10 straight Sweet 16s, and like at least one seed has to like get knocked out like first weekend. We can't just go all chalk here. So I'm going to pick Gonzaga, and Purdue's had Gonzaga's number over the last few years. So, and then if they make it that far, Elite Eight is Tennessee, and they've had Tennessee's number in all sports over the last several years. So, like I said, they could easily get bounced in the first round, but I like their path.
Would you agree with me? Because I was looking at it, and it's hard, right? Because you're looking at brands almost more than the records necessarily this year. But I really thought the Midwest region, which is the Troy region that we're talking about, and you just kind of ran through a lot of it, it's got to be, I don't know. I put it as my number one as far as if I had to say which was the toughest region to make it out of. Would you kind of agree with that? Or have you given that much of a look at all?
I think the West is pretty tough too. Like Florida's going to have to play Gonzaga if they win probably. And then they're going to have to play Maryland or most likely Maryland or Memphis. And then they're going to probably have to play St. John's. Like that's a really tough schedule for the 1 seed Florida. But yeah, I think the Midwest, the top half of the bracket, the East and the South are pretty easy for Auburn and Duke. But the bottom half of that bracket with the West and the Midwest are pretty tough.
Joe, can we at least agree that we hope to see Oregon beat the hell out of Liberty again, like they did on the national stage for football?
Yeah, nobody likes Liberty. That's easy. The one thing going into this tournament that I think's made me the most sad, I don't know if y'all saw it. There was an interview kind of right after selection Sunday show on CBS where Keith Gill, our prestigious commissioner, and the athletic director at UNC were talking about how they kind of had made the decisions. And they were very quick to say, well, anytime North Carolina was discussed, North Carolina's athletic director got the old Mike Leach treatment. They locked him in a closet and turned off the light. But so what really bothers me about that is, I don't believe that, because just because you're not directly talking about North Carolina, are you talking about schools that played North Carolina? Are you talking about teams that beat North Carolina? So really you shouldn't be in the room the majority of the time. And the second is that no one even thought to mention, well, Keith Gill, should you have been in the room? Because it's basically this tacit agreement of well, no, the Sun Belt's always just going to get one team. And that, to me, I think should make us all there are a lot of programs here, not the one in Mobile, but there are a lot of programs that are investing money, resources, buildings, all these types of things to build up basketball programs. And basically what you're seeing is the, sports media saying, well, you can always use the Sun Belt guy because it's never going to be more than one Sun Belt team. And that, to me, I think is ridiculous. And we all believed we came up to this level to have a shot. And it really seems like what we're being told, even through kind of subliminal stuff like that, is your one and only shot is to win the tournament. And that's where you get people's arguments about, well, they're only doing this format because they want to protect the team that's going to go to the tournament. But, I think that there are years, it might not be this year. I can't argue all the stats with everybody else, but there are years where we probably do deserve two teams in the tournament. Nothing against, whoever it is, Wofford or Sanford or whatever, but you can't tell me that there aren't years where the second best Sun Belt school isn't better than a SoCon school who played Furman to win their championships that's probably made out of plastic. Give me a break. But what you're saying by not even questioning Keith Gill is well, that's just the way it is. You get one team in and we're not even worried about it. So that, to me, the only time I start buying into the conspiracy theories that you see in Sun Belt Uncensored and places like that is when it's Keith was fine. Keith was in all the conversations because it wasn't even a matter of discussion whether there would be a second Sun Belt school. That was just completely out of question. And that, to me, is disappointing. And I hope to see that change, but I'm not hopeful that it will change, if that makes sense.
Yep. No, I think I can agree with that. Zach, you got thoughts on that aspect?
No, I agree. Like you said, there's a lot of teams, even at the bottom of the conference, that are putting time and money and investing into their basketball programs, and they're trying to make this league better. Even if they're sitting at the bottom, they're trying to make the bottom better. And it seems like people towards the top of this conference don't really care.
Yeah, it's Joe alluded to it earlier about the people that want to say baseball is a bigger deal. I think baseball in this conference, fan support wise, is a bigger deal, to be quite frank. I just don't think that basketball is on the same level as even baseball. But the simple fact of the matter is that basketball is the smarter place to put your money and time and effort because it brings in way more dollars, brings in way more revenue. It puts you on the national stage a lot easier. Unfortunately for baseball, your biggest part of the postseason is in the summertime when everybody's out of school and they're on vacation. You're just not getting the same amount of, importance or eyes or viewers or whatever you want to call it. That doesn't mean we don't care. Obviously, we do a whole show predicated on Sunbelt baseball, and we love it. But it's just the simple fact of the matter. Basketball brings in the dollars, and so you have to be good at that. And that Keith Gill thing, there was people that were essentially alluding to the fact that he kind of simply fought for UNC harder than he's fought for any Sunbelt school when it comes to a postseason explanation to somebody kind of defending the stance. I don't know how you defend it. I live in Chapel Hill. None of these people thought they were going. None. They're all telling me how bad of a team they've had all season long, and they end up in the postseason tournament because of their brand name. That's simple mathematics because it's just how it is. It's unacceptable that they found their way into this tournament when you have all these stats and figures can back up the fact it should have been the opposite. Now, having said all of that, do I think UNC is a bad basketball team overall that can't win a game? No, I think they might actually win a game or two in this tournament. I don't think they'll have any kind of deep run, but it's again the deserving aspect. I don't feel like they deserved it. So I think there's arguments to be made. I guess that's why they do this stuff, right? Because it brings attention. Not all attention is bad, probably is what they're thinking. And not that they need it, though, right? This is NCAA tournament, brings in the most money in all of I think the gate brings in more money than the gate for college football playoff. But obviously the TV contract is larger for the football aspect, I guess. But that's simply because of how many games they're playing and how much they charge per ticket to get into these venues. I know Raleigh down the street here is hosting first-round games between teams I care nothing about, so I won't be going to that. I was crossing my fingers like I told Joe, like if they end up in Raleigh, I'm gone. I'm right there, man. I'll find a Cardinal shirt, put it on, and go and happily cheer them on. But unfortunately, that didn't take place. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. You got any UNCW? Anybody standing out to you, Zach? You think's going to go on some kind of crazy run for Cinderella if it's not Troy?
I said UC San Diego. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a trendy pick, but I think they have a good chance to make it to the second weekend. I also like VCU. I think their draw is really good. Got BYU, who's been playing better lately, but is beatable. And then someone made the point, Wisconsin was in Indy on Selection Sunday yesterday. They had to fly back to Madison today or last night. And then they're going to have to fly to Denver and play on Thursday where they are playing at elevation. So, I mean, if they beat BYU and then they get Wisconsin, who's just played 4 games in 4 days and flew cross country and is playing elevation, which they'd never played at, that's a good recipe to make a run.
Yeah, that is good. That's a nice little tidbit there. Didn't think about that aspect. Joe, you got anybody besides Troy you're keeping an eye on or thinking might do some damage here in the tournament?
No, I mean, I as just a Southerner and an Alabama guy, I think it would be fascinating if Alabama and Auburn wound up in the national title game, simply because, and you guys, I think, will likely be able to relate to this, it would be interesting to watch two fan bases that forever and ever and ever have insulted each other, with their ultimate insult being, well, you're a basketball school, then have to both pretend to care about their basketball teams because one of them is going to win. So, like, how are they going exactly to do that? Like, do you go, but then somehow, like, pretend that you don't care either way? I just think it'll be fascinating to see kind of how that, and the culture here changes. Y'all know from being in your different states, Alabama is not what they were as a football school for many years. But, to now kind of watch them have to decide, are they going to accept the ultimate demise that they always threw upon Auburn of being a basketball school? That would be interesting. And I, as someone who's a fan of neither, I'm a Troy only guy. I would love to see exactly how they're going to handle that when they call Paul Feinbaum, on their way into the mud making factory on Monday morning, because that would be a really interesting kind of change for those two fan bases. But I don't know. I know Alabama's done well. I know Auburn is a very good team this year. But I'm sure the rest of the nation is rooting equally hard not to see two teams from the same state play each other for a national title, I'm sure.
Yeah. Zach, do you have a point to make there too?
No, but I just got this notification.
Okay.
Trilly Donovan, I think we all know him around the college basketball world as like a major insider. He's reporting that Derek Zimmerman, who was the interim head coach for Louisiana this year, is interviewing at ULM right now and has a real possibility of getting that job. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be a nice little headline for that matchup next year if that happens.
I believe they prefer to be called La. I think they prefer to be called Louisiana Lafayette. That's just my understanding. But that would be fascinating. Just as it would be fascinating to see Alabama and Auburn play for a national title that they both have to pretend not to care about. It would be interesting to see La, which I will forever call them, lose a coach to Monroe because they feel very much like they are the better institution. And they certainly spend more money than Monroe, or at least they always have. So it would be interesting to see what happens if all of a sudden Monroe starts to invest. And obviously Our Lady of Lourdes Stadium is going to be beautiful and all of that. But we'll see what happens if Lafayette is forced to start keeping up with the Joneses or the Joneses spelled with a E-A-U-X, however they do it down there in Arcadia.
Oh man, yeah. You know what? Whoever's doing the hiring down there at ULM is going to look real smart here in a minute because they took the guy from UAB who was not wanted after a good interim spell. They're going to be doing the same thing possibly with Louisiana at this point. And hey, man, if those things continue to work out, they know where they're going, and whoever's doing the hiring process is paying attention to the people who are getting it done in short order and bringing them into a team in a program in ULM who needs some of those things to be turned around in quite the fashion from where they currently sit, right? So, well, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Be sure to tune in Friday to see Troy take on Kentucky tomorrow night or tonight, depending on when you're watching or listening to this. If you want to check out A-State versus St. Louis, that game on ESPNU, as we talked about earlier. And until next week, hopefully we have more basketball show to give you because that means some of these teams are winning. We will see you guys next time.